Why do domesticated horses possess white markings, while their wild counterparts do not? This seemingly simple query has perplexed scientists and breeders for centuries. Now, science has finally unveiled the answer, profoundly altering our understanding of the human-equine relationship. Most individuals seldom ponder these markings. They are simply present, on the neck, forehead, scattered across the body, irregular, asymmetrical, seemingly capricious. Many surmise they were mere aesthetic variations, inconsequential blemishes, or non-functional genetic anomalies. However, the latest data reveals a far more significant revelation. Genetic studies comparing domesticated horse populations with their still wild progenitors have illuminated a clear pattern. These markings are virtually absent among horses living freely in their natural habitats. So, what has changed? What accounts for the appearance of these patterns specifically in animals that have coexisted with humans for generations? Researchers resolved to delve beyond superficial appearances. They meticulously analyzed DNA, historical records of domestication, and the behavior of modern lineages. The discovery is astonishing. White markings are not the product of chance. They are a direct consequence of the domestication process. These marks are intrinsically linked to genetic alterations that emerged over millennia of human interaction. They signify not only a physical adaptation, but also a reflection of profound shifts in behavior, biology, and artificial selection. Furthermore, some of these alterations are connected to genes influencing temperament, confidence, and even sociability. In essence, the markings are not merely visual. They are indicators of how horses have transformed through their proximity to us. This paradigm shift is monumental. For an extended period, domestication was perceived as a unilateral imposition by humans. Yet, these markings narrate a different saga, one of mutual transformation, visibly etched upon the animal's physique. Remain engaged until the conclusion, as we will elucidate how these findings will shape the future of breeding, training, and interspecies relationships. Your perception of a horse will be irrevocably altered. For a considerable duration, white markings were attributed to random crossbreeding, age-related phenomena, or inconsequential genetic scars. Breeders referred to them as inherited traits, akin to eye color or ear shape, something passed down through generations without a specific underlying reason. Science, too, largely overlooked their significance. After all, they were merely coat variations, cosmetic issues. They didn't appear to have any significant biological function. They didn't affect health, nor did they alter behavior. They were just, well, spots. Beautiful, perhaps. Distinctive, certainly, but devoid of any clear evolutionary purpose. Consequently, for decades, they were relegated to a minor curiosity, a decorative detail of nature. But now we know we were utterly mistaken. These are not simple coincidences. Modern science, aided by molecular genetics and ancient DNA sequencing, has begun to unveil something extraordinary. These spots are biological markers of domestication. They are genetic markers that emerge precisely when a species begins to coexist intimately with humans. In other words, horses bear on their skin the physical imprint of having been domesticated, of having been chosen, of having been shaped by human presence over millennia. What once seemed mere aesthetic variation is, in fact, the evolutionary trace of a silent transformation, a transformation that occurred within the cells, but which originated externally, in the daily interaction between two species. This implies that each white spot tells a story of selection, not merely physical, but emotional. Humans selected the calmer horses, the more cooperative ones, the less aggressive, and in doing so, unknowingly, they altered something profound in their genetic code. The spots were not planned. They were not intentionally created, but they emerged as a byproduct of another, far more significant, choice. The choice of docility, of trust, of the capacity to live together without fear. And this choice left visible marks, as if their coexistence had painted the animal's body, as if each touch, each moment of peace, each generation of horses raised alongside humans, had added another brushstroke of white upon the dark coat. Now, the question shifts entirely. It is no longer why they have white spots. It is what these spots reveal about us, about the way we shape other species, about the invisible power of prolonged coexistence. Because if the spots are biological memories, then each horse is a living book, a walking record of 5,000 years of shared history. And to comprehend this history, we must return to the beginning. We must understand when and how it all started, when the first human looked at a wild horse and saw not prey, but a partner, and how that choice changed both forever. The domestication of the horse began approximately 5.5 millennia ago on the vast steppes of Eurasia, in regions that now belong to Kazakhstan. It was one of the most transformative events in human history. Prior to this, horses were merely game, hunted, slaughtered, consumed. But something shifted. The earliest archaeological records stem from a culture known as Botai, where researchers discovered horse bones bearing wear marks on their teeth, suggestive of primitive rein use. They also found residues of mare's milk stored in clay vessels. This proves they weren't just hunting. They were breeding, they were cohabiting, and this cohabitation altered everything. It changed how humans moved, waged war, and transported goods. But it also changed the horses themselves, in ways no one at the time could have possibly imagined, because the transformation wasn't solely behavioral. It occurred at the genetic level, but something curious began to emerge over the centuries. As horses coexisted with humans, coat patterns that previously didn't exist started to appear. While wild horses maintained uniform hues, brown, black, golden, gray, the domesticated ones began exhibiting spots, stripes, and depigmentation. Horses with stars on their foreheads, horses with white stockings on their legs, horses with large, irregular splotches on their bodies. It was as if domestication had flipped an invisible genetic switch, and for a long time, no one understood why. It seemed mere aesthetic diversity, until modern genetics began to investigate, and what it uncovered was revolutionary. Current science suggests these alterations weren't merely aesthetic, but direct genetic responses to the domestication process, changes that occurred because humans selected certain horses over others, and this selection left indelible marks. In 2018, a team of researchers led by Ludovic Orlando, one of the world's foremost experts in ancient DNA, sequenced the genomes of hundreds of prehistoric horses, horses that lived before domestication, horses that lived during the initial centuries of coexistence with humans, and modern horses. The comparison was revelatory. The outcome was crystalline. The mutations responsible for white markings only appear after the onset of domestication. They are absent in truly wild horses. They are absent in prehistoric ancestors. They emerge only when humans enter history. This is not a coincidence. It is direct evidence that cohabitation altered the animal's biology, and it altered it visibly, permanently, heritably. Each generation carried more of these mutations. Each century added new patterns. Until today, we look at a domestic horse and see a mosaic of colors that would never exist in nature. But why did this happen? Why would domestication cause changes in pigmentation? The answer lies in something scientists call a byproduct of selection. Humans didn't choose horses because of the spots. They chose them for their temperament. They wanted calm, predictable animals that wouldn't panic easily. Animals that would accept human presence without fleeing or attacking. And by selecting for these behavioral traits, they ended up also selecting genes that controlled other things. Genes linked to the nervous system, genes linked to hormone production, and genes linked to skin pigmentation. Everything was connected. Changing one inevitably meant changing the others. And so, without realizing it, ancient breeders sculpted not only the behavior, but also the appearance of horses. The white spots are therefore silent witnesses to this process. They are living proof that choosing docility has profound genetic consequences, consequences that spread throughout the organism. These white spots are linked to specific genes that affect melanin, the pigment responsible for the coloration of skin, fur, and even eyes. Among the most studied are the KIT, MITF, and PAX3 genes. These names may seem like mere technical acronyms, but they represent something fascinating. They are the same genes associated with depigmentation patterns in dogs, cats, foxes, and even humans. This means there is a universal pattern. Whenever a species is domesticated, these genes tend to undergo mutations. Whenever animals are selected for docility, white spots appear. It is a phenomenon repeated across different mammals, on different continents, in different eras, as if domestication followed an invisible biological recipe. And this recipe always includes, among other ingredients, depigmentation. But here comes the truly surprising part. These genes do not appear by chance. They were indirectly selected by humans. Unintentionally, without planning, but inevitably so. How exactly did this happen? For millennia, breeders instinctively selected the calmest, most social, most cooperative horses. Those that didn't bite, those that accepted touch, those that learned quickly, those that didn't panic at novelties. These behavioral traits are deeply intertwined with a suite of neuroendocrine alterations, changes in adrenaline, cortisol, and serotonin levels, shifts in how the brain responds to stress. And all these changes are governed by biological systems that also affect embryonic development. Specifically, they impact something called neural crest cells. These cells, during embryo formation, migrate to various parts of the body and transform into diverse structures: facial bones, neurons, adrenal glands, and also melanocytes, the pigment-producing cells. When you alter behavior, you alter neural crest cells. And when you alter these cells, you alter everything they produce, including coat color. This phenomenon has a scientific name. It's known as domestication syndrome, a constellation of physical changes that consistently appear in domesticated animals. And it's not exclusive to horses. Dogs have floppy ears, shorter snouts, curled tails, and yes, white spots. Domesticated foxes in Russian experiments developed the same traits within a few generations. Domesticated pigs have coat patterns, wild boars do not. Domestic cats exhibit colors that wild cats rarely display. It's as if domestication is a universal sculpting force. It shapes not just behavior, but also anatomy, physiology, appearance, and it does so consistently, by reducing aggression, by increasing neoteny, meaning the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood, and by altering pigmentation. Biology suggests that by selecting for less aggressive animals, humans inadvertently altered the genes of neural crest cells, which influence both behavior and physical appearance. It's a complex genetic dance where tinkering with one element moves all the others. In essence, white spots are a physical manifestation of peace. They are the genetic signature of an ancient pact between two species. Each spot is a biological memento of the moment an ancestor of that horse was chosen not for its strength, but for its placidity, not for its aggression, but for its cooperation. And this choice, reiterated generation after generation, sculpted not only the mind, but also the body. It transformed predators into partners. It transformed fear into trust. And it left visible marks, like scars of light, like open windows in dark coats, like permanent reminders that coexistence transforms, that choosing peace has biological consequences, that docility is not weakness, but a genetic revolution. And now that you understand where these spots come from, you need to understand what they cost, because every transformation has a price. And white spots too have theirs, but each mark carries a cost, and that cost is rarely discussed. The same genetic mutations that generated beautiful patterns and docile horses also rendered the animals more vulnerable to certain conditions. Nature does not operate with free exchanges. When you tamper with a complex biological system, the consequences ripple outwards, and not all of them are positive. Recent studies link depigmentation with heightened ocular sensitivity. Horses with large white areas around their eyes, particularly those with blue or partially blue eyes, exhibit a greater propensity for vision problems. Melanin does not merely serve for coloration, it shields tissues against ultraviolet radiation. Without it, the retina becomes more exposed. The cornea grows more fragile, and in environments of intense light, this can lead to chronic discomfort, recurrent inflammation, even progressive vision degeneration. It is a silent price many horses pay without their owners realizing. Furthermore, depigmented skin is more susceptible to the sun. Horses with extensive white markings, especially in tropical or high luminosity regions, develop sunburns with ease. The skin becomes red, inflamed, peels. Over time, this can evolve into squamous cell carcinoma, a type of skin cancer. It is not uncommon. Veterinarians who work with light-coated horses are well acquainted with this issue. They must apply sunscreen, create artificial shade, adjust exposure schedules, all because depigmentation, that beautiful mark we admire, also removed a layer of natural protection. And there is more. Certain studies suggest that in extreme cases of depigmentation, particularly in horses with highly altered genetic profiles, there may be a predisposition to auditory disorders. This can manifest as partial or total deafness and balance issues. This phenomenon arises because neural crest cells, which we've previously discussed, are also instrumental in forming structures of the inner ear. Interfering with these cells can yield unforeseen consequences. Nature does not bestow gifts without exacting a price. This is the fundamental tenet of evolution. Docility and trustworthiness gained prominence. Horses became more amenable, more adaptable to human cohabitation, and more capable of forming emotional bonds. However, a portion of their inherent wild resilience was relinquished. Some of the biological armor that once safeguarded them in their natural habitat was lost. This raises a disquieting question. Was it worth it? From a human perspective, Undoubtedly. We gained extraordinary partners, animals that enabled us to conquer continents, forge civilizations, and fundamentally reshape history. But from the horse's vantage point, they traded fortitude for gentleness. They exchanged protection for proximity. They surrendered absolute freedom for a place by our side. And the white patches serve as the visible emblem of this exchange. Each one represents a genetic negotiation, a fragment of untamed nature supplanted by something more pliable, more human. Consequently, every white patch narrates a tale of equilibrium between strength and surrender, between instinct and coexistence, between ancient liberty and modern kinship. When you observe a horse adorned with these patches, you are beholding a creature sculpted by millennia of human choices. Choices that brought beauty, yes, and partnership, loyalty, and connection, but also introduced vulnerability. Perhaps this is what imbues the patches with such profundity. They are not merely aesthetic, they are memory, they are cost, they are the price paid for peace. Contemplating them with this understanding transforms everything, for you now recognize that each white patch also signifies a responsibility, a reminder that domestication is not domination but a pact, and every pact demands care, requires protection, and necessitates acknowledging the weight of what we have gained, a weight inscribed upon their very skin. We now apprehend the complete truth. The white patches are not solely ornamental, they are biological chronicles. Each one encapsulates the narrative of an unseen process, the metamorphosis of a wild creature into an emotional companion. Scientists refer to this as emotional co-evolution. When two species coexist for sufficient time, across countless generations, their biologies mold one another. It isn't merely humans domesticating horses, it is also horses domesticating us. They have adapted their brains to comprehend our intentions, to read our emotions, to anticipate our movements. And we, unknowingly, have shaped their genetics. We selected traits that benefited us, but also traits that touched us. Gentler horses, more connected, more present. The outcome of this exchange manifests on their skin, like luminous scars from an ancient bond, like open windows into a shared history, like tangible proof that coexistence transforms everything. The white marking, therefore, is a symbol, not of fragility, but of proximity, not of imperfection, but of connection. It marks the precise point where nature yielded to coexistence, the moment pure instinct opened itself to the possibility of a bond. It serves as a reminder that domestication was not solely about control. It was exchange, it was affection, it was shared learning. Each generation of horses born in proximity to humans carried a little more of this mark. Every choice we made shaped their appearance a little further. And today, when we behold a horse with markings, we are gazing upon 5 millennia of history condensed into patterns on their skin. We are witnessing the tangible outcome of a collective decision, the decision to live together, to trust, to transform predation into partnership, and to let that change both of us forever. And perhaps the most profound realization of all is that the markings are bilateral. Not only were the horses marked, we were too. Our history, our culture, our entire civilization has been shaped by their presence. Domesticating the horse enabled us to travel farther, to wage war differently, to build empires, to connect distant people. It altered how we cultivate, how we trade, how we relate to space. And while they bear physical marks of this alliance, we carry cultural ones, emotional ones, marks on our very perception of the world. So, in the end, the white markings are not solely theirs. They are ours as well. They are the emblem of a mutual transformation, of a shared journey, of a pact that has left indelible traces on both sides. And to recognize this is to acknowledge that domestication is, in truth, too small a word to encapsulate what transpired. What transpired was a confluence of destinies, and the markings are the very signature of this union. The next time you observe a horse bearing a white blaze, do not perceive it as an imperfection. Do not regard it as a mere genetic anomaly or an inconsequential decorative detail. Instead, apprehend it as the genetic imprimatur of trust. Behold it as a living testament to millennia of coexistence. Each marking is a silent recollection of the initial instance a horse refrained from flight when approached by humankind, of the first touch that engendered no panic, of the inaugural gaze devoid of apprehension, of that primal moment when predator and prey mutually resolved to forge an alternate path. It is as though nature itself etched luminous apertures upon these creatures, forms, lest we ever forget that coexistence is itself transformative, that proximity leaves indelible traces. that the deliberate choice of peace yields palpable consequences. These markings narrate a saga of peaceful surrender, of unfeigned collaboration, of mutual curiosity that triumphed over fear. And they bear the onus of that epical decision, the vulnerability inherent in their docility, the price exacted for companionship. While science may elucidate the gene, map the mutations, and trace the neural crest cells, the revelation it uncovers transcends any DNA sequence. It is incontrovertible evidence that the bond between human and horse was so profound, so enduring, so potent, that it imprinted visible vestiges upon their very being. It altered their biology. It rewrote their genetic code. It adorned their hides with effulgent artistry. And it reminds us, daily, that domestication is not subjugation. It is an alliance. It is mutual metamorphosis. It is the acknowledgement that shared existence irrevocably reshapes both parties. Share in the comments below. Have you ever noticed patterns in the white markings of different horses? Have you observed how each possesses its own unique brands, akin to fingerprints? Do you believe they embody distinct personalities or are imbued with associated memories? Recount your experiences. And if this insight has fundamentally altered your perception of these markings, if you now perceive history where previously you saw only pigment, subscribe to the channel. We shall continue to collaboratively unravel that which science unveils and that which the heart has long divined. For every mark, every detail, every pattern upon their skin is a narrative. And some stories are inscribed not in words, but in luminescence,